تو میدان آتیش زدن.
The 1979 Iranian Revolution was not the result of a sudden event or the will of a particular group. This transformation was the outcome of years of accumulated political, economic, and social grievances across various sectors of society. In the final years of the Pahlavi regime, the centralization of power, limited political participation, economic inequalities, and the widening gap between the state and society created an environment where gradual reform became difficult. In such circumstances, various social groups with different perspectives and demands entered the scene. Some sought to preserve the existing structure with reforms, while others considered fundamental change necessary. Simultaneously, religious discourse emerged as one of the primary languages of protest and, alongside other movements, played a significant role in organizing and linking these grievances. As protests continued, public confidence in the government's ability to manage the crisis declined. Strikes, street gatherings, and civil disobedience spread, and fractures reached within the institutions of power. Ultimately, when a portion of the military distanced itself from clashing with the people, and the army declared its neutrality, the path for the revolution was cleared, and the previous political order collapsed. Thus, the revolution took shape not in a single moment, but through a gradual process following the erosion of political authority and the expanded presence of the people. In this documentary, I want to address the 48 hours remaining until the 1979 revolution and the final hours of the monarchy. Before that, I will provide a brief look at the current protests in Iran, which began on December 28, 2025, and continue to this day, comparing these protests with the 1979 revolution. Please subscribe to this channel and support us. The current protest movements in Iran, much like the 1979 revolution, are not the product of a single factor or a homogeneous demand. These movements formed in a context where segments of society faced a combination of economic pressures, social restrictions, a decline in public trust, and hopelessness regarding paths to reform. Chronic inflation, reduced purchasing power, widespread migration, and a sense of inequality and opportunities gradually provided the ground for broader discontent. Alongside economic issues, social and cultural restrictions, especially for younger generations, played a major role in shaping the protests. A generation that has no direct experience of the 1979 revolution defines its demands mostly around daily life, individual dignity, and a predictable future. In this environment, protests formed not with centralized leadership, but in a scattered, networked, and largely spontaneous manner. A notable point is that during these developments, the perspective of a portion of society toward the past has also changed. While in 1979, the main demand of a large part of the people was the end of the Pahlavi government, today some protesters look back at the past with a comparative lens, not necessarily out of political nostalgia, but in reaction to the current situation. In this view, the name Shah represents more than a specific system. It is interpreted as a symbol of protest against current conditions and a search for stability, prosperity, and order. Despite this, many of these protesters have taken to the streets chanting slogans such as "Long live the Shah," "Pahlavi will return," and "Long live Reza Shah." The protests of December 2025 in Iran consist of a wide wave of protest gatherings and strikes that began on December 28, 2025, in Tehran and gradually spread to other provinces, and even migrants in various parts of the world took part in protests. The wave of these protests expanded significantly over several days and was met with suppression by the military. According to reports, as of today, Friday, January 16, 2026, when this documentary is being recorded, between 12,000 to 20,000 people have been killed in these protests.
تو میدان آتیش زدن.
آقا چرخ خالی کن بیار آقا. کجا کشتنش؟
رفتون بگم
کجا کشتنش؟
دایی رو تو هفته تیر رسیده از بالای آرمیتاش تکتیر اندازا زدنش و در تو قلبش منطقه بالاترین کشتن رو داده، حمام خون رو انداختن تو دوله بالای 3,000 تا جنازه رو هم انداخته بودن. از بچه 12 ساله رو بیه بعد 70 ساله اولش رو هم انداخته بودن تو قتل عام کردن.
What will be the result of these protests, and what fate lies ahead for Iran? Write to us in the comments. And now, the 1979 revolution, the bloody battle between the Homafars, Air Force technicians, and the Royal Guard, the arming of ordinary people, the seizure of barracks and police stations, the barricading of Tehran's streets, and hand-to-hand combat between the people and military forces under martial law, the early broadcast of Ayatollah Khomeini's images and films on national television, the resistance of Shapur Bakhtiar, and finally, the army's declaration of neutrality, were among the most important and decisive events in the final hours of the Pahlavi government. Events that eventually led to the victory of the 1979 revolution and the establishment of the Islamic Republic. On Friday, February 9th, 1979, just 2 days before the victory of the revolution, a bloody clash began between the Air Force technicians, Homafars, and the Royal Guard. During this time, Iranian cities, especially Tehran, were plunged into chaos and rebellion. This turmoil had begun on January 16, 1979, following the departure of Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi and his wife, Farah Diba, from the country, and intensified every day. Tehran had become the main hub of political movements. From different parts of the city, the sounds of gunfire, explosions, and various slogans could be heard. At all hours of the day and night, the city's main streets and squares witnessed massive gatherings and demonstrations. Large groups of people holding pictures of Ayatollah Khomeini chanted, "Death to the Shah," and "Hail to Khomeini." In contrast, several thousand supporters of the Pahlavi government gathered in front of the residence and office of Shapur Bakhtiar, the last prime minister of the Pahlavi regime, chanting slogans such as, "The one who gave his life to save Iran is Shapur Bakhtiar," "Long live the Shah," and "Independence, Freedom, Constitution." On that same day, February 9th, 1979, Shapur Bakhtiar revealed the implementation of Operation Strike, a plan under which more than 600 political and religious activists were arrested. This plan had previously been proposed by some close associates of Mohammad Reza Shah to maintain control and suppress protests, a plan the Shah never agreed to, but Bakhtiar saw as the last way to contain the revolution. Bakhtiar explicitly stated that the government would no longer tolerate chaos. At the same time, Ayatollah Khomeini spoke of freedom of expression and the press, emphasizing that the people's uprising was for independence, freedom, the establishment of a government of justice, and the realization of human rights. In government meetings, Bakhtiar spoke of a list of 603 people who were to be arrested on Saturday, February 10th, 1979. Another important decision he made that day was ordering the broadcast of the film of Ayatollah Khomeini's return from France on national Iranian television. This film was related to February 1st, 1979, the day Khomeini returned to Tehran from Paris after a long period of exile in Turkey, Iraq, and France. And thousands of Iranians went to Mehrabad airport for a massive welcome. The day Khomeini declared Bakhtiar's government illegal and spoke of forming a new government. By broadcasting this film, Bakhtiar tried to show that he did not oppose freedom of expression and supported pluralism, seeking to win the people's trust. He also hoped that by showing the dialogues between Khomeini and Sadegh Ghotbzadeh, people would become more aware of the revolutionary leader's positions. However, this decision had the opposite effect, severely provoking public sentiment and leading to a bloody clash at the Doshan Tepe Air Force Academy in eastern Tehran between the Homafars and the Royal Guard. On the evening of that same day, after the 8:30 p.m. news and the display of Khomeini's images, a fierce clash broke out at the Doshan Tepe Air Force Training Center. A number of soldiers and technicians who were watching television in the barracks began to show their emotions, sending salutations and chanting slogans upon seeing Khomeini's images. This led to an armed clash between the Air Force personnel and the Royal Guard. Around 9 p.m., the sound of continuous gunfire was heard from eastern Tehran. Screams and the sound of gunshots drew people out of their homes and into the streets. A large crowd moved toward the camp, chanting in support of the Homafars. The Air Force personnel shouted, "Allahu Akbar," from inside the camp, asking the people for help. Inside the camp, mutual firing continued. In these clashes, dozens were killed and hundreds were wounded. A number of Homafars managed to escape the camp and seek refuge at Khomeini's residence. An hour later, the camp and surrounding streets were besieged by the Guard and military governorate forces, but the clashes continued for 2 days. Simultaneously, in other Iranian cities, clashes occurred between government supporters and revolutionaries, resulting in many casualties. In Tehran, at the 1st Fighter Base, an armed clash also broke out between Air Force forces and the Royal Guard. On that same day, Mehdi Bazargan, along with figures such as Ibrahim Yazdi, Sadegh Ghotbzadeh, Akbar Hashemi Rafsanjani, Ahmad Sadr Haj Sayyid Javadi, Morteza Motahari, Ezatollah Sahabi, and Gholam Abbas Tavasoli appeared at the University of Tehran and addressed his supporters. The people declared their support for the interim government with the slogan, "Salute to Bazargan, the Prime Minister of Iran." The clash between the Air Force and the Royal Guard triggered widespread street-to-street fighting in Tehran. On Saturday, February 10th, 1979, a large number of people were armed. Streets were barricaded with sandbags, and tires and wood were set on fire. The city took on a completely martial appearance. Tehran was engulfed in smoke and fire, and a full-scale war was underway. From dusk until the next morning, the sound of gunfire and grenade explosions did not stop. Hospitals admitted dozens of wounded every moment. On this day, The military governorate of Tehran issued a statement increasing the curfew hours, moving the start of the night curfew from midnight to 4:30 p.m. This meant that, unlike other days when people faced movement restrictions from midnight, they were now to stay home from 4:30 p.m. until 12 p.m. the next day. The military governorate stated the purpose of this decision was to fight the insurgents. With the release of this statement, rumors spread throughout Tehran. It was said this action aimed to create distance between the people and the Air Force personnel who had been clashing with the Imperial Guard since the night before. The reality was that Bakhtiar's government intended to clear the city by increasing the curfew hours and implement Operation Strike to arrest targeted individuals. In response to this decision, Ruhollah Khomeini issued a statement to the people telling them not to heed the military governorate's announcement and to stay in the streets. He called this move a conspiracy against the Air Force technicians to destroy them in the absence of the people and described martial law as illegal and deceptive. Khomeini also warned that if the aggressions and violence were not stopped, he would issue a jihad order. Mehdi Bazargan also issued a separate statement asking the people not to obey the Tehran military governorate's order. As a result, starting in the afternoon, people gathered and demonstrated in various parts of Tehran, including Jaleh Square, Tehran Ino, Shahnaz Square, Khorasan Square, Farrahabad, and around the Air Force Base. In some areas, young people with speakers read Khomeini's and Bazargan's statements, urging people not to leave the streets. The next day, Kayhan newspaper wrote that the military government intended to carry out a coup by increasing the curfew hours. Etelaat newspaper also carried the headline, "The people and Air Force personnel crushed the military group's coup attempt," writing that the government had intended to launch a coup at 9 p.m. with the help of forces stationed in and around Tehran, and possibly forces from Qazvin. But the arming of the people and the expansion of urban resistance foiled the plan. From noon that day, the widespread distribution of weapons intensified in various parts of Tehran among the people. Around universities, mosques, and especially near the army weapons factory on Farrahabad Road, weapons were handed over to applicants. Many received weapons by presenting their military service completion papers. Members of the People's Fedai Guerrillas, the People's Mojahedin Organization, and the Two-Day Party, who were present in the heart of urban armed clashes, not only distributed weapons, but also trained people on how to use them. On this day, a large number of people were armed, and even heavy weapons were deployed in street barricades. Following this situation, several police stations, gendarmerie posts, and police and army centers were captured by armed people and Air Force personnel. Streets were blocked with obstacles, and armed clashes and shootings occurred in some areas. On the same day, people attacked police stations and the weapons factory to seize them. Among them, from 1 p.m., a group of armed individuals, including Mojahedin-e-Khalq, Fedai Guerrillas, and Air Force personnel, attacked and besieged the Tehran Ino police station. Attackers fired at the station from rooftops. Some police officers surrendered and handed their weapons to the people, but others resisted. Finally, at 10 p.m., the people entered the station. It fell, and its weapons and equipment were seized. Police Station Number 10 on Iran Mare Street was captured with Molotov cocktails and hunting rifles. Afterward, armed youths moved toward the Army Weapons Factory. The attack on this factory began at 11 p.m. They broke the southern gate with a trailer, and the clash continued until morning with firing from both sides. Finally, at 8 a.m. on February 11, 1979, the eastern wall of the factory was breached, and thousands of people entered. Various light and heavy weapons, including machine guns, rifles, and more than 10,000 bayonets fell into the hands of the people. Simultaneously, other centers such as the Sepah, Imam Hussein, Square Police Station, the Gendarmerie Headquarters in 24 Esfand Square, the Machine Gun Factory, the Police Headquarters in Topkane Square, and the Narmak Police Station also fell. These clashes led to the death of hundreds and the wounding of thousands in Tehran and other cities. On February 11th, Kayhan wrote that large parts of Tehran had come under the control of armed people and the Air Force after hours of battle. The most intense clashes occurred between the Imperial Guard and the people during the seizure of military centers, during which several tanks were destroyed or captured by the people. Interestingly, from the night of February 10th, in areas that had fallen to the control of the people and the Air Force, civilian guard posts were set up to prevent the infiltration of forces loyal to the regime. On the morning of February 11th, a group of 150 armed individuals, along with Air Force personnel, moved toward Arg Square and besieged the radio building, a siege that lasted until the next day. On the same day, Shapur Bakhtiar announced in an interview with a French media outlet that he was ready to negotiate but would not resign from the position of prime minister. He warned that his resignation could lead the country toward chaos, civil war, and a military coup. In the early morning of Sunday, February 11th, several tanks moved from Sohravardi Street and fired upon the positions of the people and the Air Force. But the resistance continued. From the early hours of the morning, the people's attack on military bases intensified, and finally, around 10 a.m., the Supreme Council of the Army declared its neutrality, and the conflict tilted in favor of the revolutionaries. The statement of the Supreme Council of the Army said that to prevent further bloodshed, the Army declared its neutrality in political disputes, and units would return to their bases. The broadcast of this news over the radio effectively meant the fall of the Pahlavi government and the victory of the revolution. After the announcement of the Army's neutrality on radio and then television, the siege of the radio and television building was broken, and the armed individuals who had besieged the radio building and the Jam complex since the previous day left the area. In the afternoon of the same day, Shapur Bakhtiar, when he became certain there was no longer a way to change the situation, left the Prime Minister's office by helicopter for an unknown destination. He lived in a hiding place inside Iran for a while until he finally managed to leave Iran with a forged passport and go to France. On February 12, 1979, newspapers published massive headlines. Etellaat newspaper wrote, "Yesterday, the nation destroyed the palace of 57 years of oppression." Kayhan also declared with a large headline, "The fall of the 2,500-year-old system of tyranny. The army of the revolution liberated the cities." Flipping through the newspapers of this day, the congratulatory message of Mohammad Kazem Shariat Madari caught the eye, a cleric and Shia authority who was soon sidelined from the Islamic Revolution circle and was later placed under house arrest by Khomeini's order, eventually dying while ill and deprived of proper treatment. On the same pages, a note from Masoud Rajavi, leader of the People's Mojahedin organization, was seen in support of the Islamic Revolution, and also a piece by Nureddin Kianuri, leader of the Tudeh Party, particularly significant given the historical fact that many of these individuals and groups became enemies of the Islamic Republic in later years, and a number of their members were executed by the government. On this same day, the National Consultative Assembly, Majlis, immediately declared solidarity with the revolution, and the Speaker of the Majlis, Javad Saeed, resigned. The Senate also announced its dissolution, and senators resigned collectively from the Assembly. Similarly, the Regency Council was dissolved. Just one day after the victory of the revolution, news of the formation of Revolutionary People's Courts was published, and Khomeini asked the people to hand over their weapons to the Prime Minister's headquarters. These events were a collection of the most important occurrences in Iran in the 48 hours before and after the victory of the 1979 revolution. During this period, Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi and his wife, Farah Diba, were staying in Morocco at the palace of King Hassan. Farah Diba later recounted that at night, hearing the news of the revolution, she could not believe such an event had actually happened, and for a few moments thought Bakhtiar's government had won. Mohammad Reza Shah also followed the news of Iran from his room via radio. He did not leave his room that day and did not even come out for dinner. He seemed both saddened by the situation in Iran and in a state of shock and disbelief. Shapur Bakhtiar also later recounted that when the helicopter took off from the Prime Minister's building, he said to himself, "We wanted to give freedom, but these people do not want freedom. What can be done?" He described this moment as a mix of sorrow and liberation, saying it was as if a burden as heavy as Mount Damavand had been lifted from his shoulders. Finally, at 2 p.m. on February 11th, 1979, the radio announcer declared, "This is Tehran, the true voice of the Iranian nation, the voice of the revolution." And this was the beginning of the Islamic Republic government in Iran until now. Please write your predictions in the comments regarding Iran's current situation for the future of this country. Thank you.